variable equation. But wait, what does that mean? Regardless, today we'll be looking at complicated examples of single variable equations, like these. Wow, these look pretty confusing. So let's start solving them, starting with this one. Here is a single variable equation. X over 2 minus x over 6 is equal to 4. In this equation, x is the variable, or in other words, x is the missing value, and it is the value that we need to find. Also, this equation has 3 terms. Remember, a term is a constant or a variable that is on either side of an addition, subtraction, or equal sign. So the 3 terms in this equation are x over 2, negative x over 6, and 4. In this equation, we are also dealing with fractions. So, in order to solve this equation, we need to get rid of these fractions. But how can we do that? Let's start by rewriting this equation. Here, I have rewritten this equation. Now, as you can see, on the left side of this equation, we are dealing with 2 fractions. So why don't we write this constant also in fraction form? As you can see, I wrote 4 as 4 over 1, or in fraction form. This will make it a lot easier to understand. Now, we want to get rid of these fractions because they look a little confusing and complicated. So, let's find the LCM, or the least common multiple of these denominators. We can start by writing the factors for each of these numbers, starting with 2. The factors of 2 are 1 and 2. Next, the factors of 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. Now notice how 2 and 1 are both factors of 6. So, the least common multiple of these 3 numbers is 6. Now that we've found the least common multiple, we can multiply it to the entire equation. So let's do that. Notice what I did here. I used parentheses to show that we are multiplying 6 to the entire equation. This is an extremely important step. So remember to use your parentheses. Now, we can use the distributive property and distribute 6 to each of these terms. So let's write that out. As you can see, I distributed 6 to each of these terms, and I used parentheses around each term. Now, let's cross out and divide anything that we can. 2 goes into 6 3 times. 6 goes into 6 1 time. Now, let's multiply this out. 3 times x is 3x minus 1 times x, which is 1, x, is equal to 6 times 4, which is 24. So, 3x minus x is equal to 24. This looks a lot easier. Now, let's simplify the left side of this equation. 3x minus x is 2x. Now, we want to keep x alone on one side of the equation. So let's take 2 to the other side. Here it's multiplying. So it will divide when we take it to the other side. X is equal to 24 over 2, or x is equal to 12, which is a solution to our equation. Now, let's look at another example. Here's another equation. X over 4 minus 3 is equal to 2x over 3. This equation also has 3 terms. And as you can see, x is the variable in this equation. Now, in this equation, we're dealing with fractions again. However, on the left side, we have a variable term and a constant. And on the right side, we have another variable term. So why don't we bring these two variable terms to one side of the equation? Well, let's start by writing this again. Here, I have rewritten the equation. So now, let's take x over 4 to the other side of the equal sign. Here, it's positive, so on the other side of the equal sign, it will be negative. Now, let's write -3 in fraction form, since, after all, we're dealing with fractions. So, I can write -3 as -3 over 1. Next, let's get rid of these fractions. And in order to do that, let's find the LCM of 1, 3, and 4. Now that we found the least common multiple, let's multiply it to the entire equation. And remember to use parentheses. Now, we can distribute 12 to each one of these terms. Now, let's cross and divide anything that we can. 3 goes into 12 4 times. And 4 goes into 12 3 times. Next, let's multiply and write this out. 12 times -3 is -36. 4 times 2x is 8x. Minus 3 times x is 3x. So, -36 is equal to 8x minus 3x. We can simplify the right side of this equation, which gives us -36 is equal to 5x. Now, let's take this 5 to the other side of the equation, where it will divide. So, -36 over 5 is equal to x, or x is -36 over 5, which is a solution to our equation. Let's look at a more complex example. Here we have another equation. And in this equation, there are 3 terms. This term, and this term. The variables in this equation are x, and it is the value that we need to solve for. So let's start by writing this equation again. Here, I've rewritten this equation. Now, this equation looks a little more complicated because the numerator of this fraction is x plus 2. So, let's add parentheses around x plus 2. And this will tell us that we must keep this together and consider it as one whole. Now, let's write -1 in fraction form. As you can see, I've written -1 as -1 over 1 in fraction form. And since you want to get rid of these fractions, we need to find the least common multiple. So let's start by finding the least common multiple of 8, 2, and 1. The factors for 8 are 1, 2, 4, and 8. The factors for 2 are 1 and 2. Now, as you can see, 1 and 2 are both factors of 8. So, the least common multiple of 8, 2, and 1 is 8. Now, let's multiply the least common multiple to this entire equation. And keep in mind to use parentheses. Now, let's multiply 8 to each of these terms by distributing it. As you can see, I multiplied 8 to each of these terms, and I used parentheses around each term. Now let's divide everything that we can. 8 goes into 8 one time. 2 goes into 8 4 times. Now, let's multiply everything and write this down. 1 times x is simply x, plus 4 times x plus 2. Remember to use the parentheses. And 8 times negative 1 over 1 is simply negative 8. Now, let's open these parentheses. X plus 4 times x, which is 4x, plus 4 times 2. Is equal to negative 8. X plus 4x plus 4 times 2, which is 8, is equal to negative 8. Now, let's add these two variable terms together. X plus 4x is 5x. 5x plus 8 is equal to negative 8. Next, let's take this constant to the other side. 5x is equal to negative 8 minus 8, or 5x is equal to negative 16. And finally, let's take 5 to the other side of this equation. X is equal to negative 16 over 5, which is a solution to this equation. Now let's look at another example. Here's another equation. X plus 2 over 3 plus x minus 3 over 4 is equal to 1. This equation also has 3 terms. So let's start by writing this equation again. Just like we did before, let's put parentheses around x plus 2 and x minus 3. Parentheses tells us that we need to keep this together and consider it as 1. Now, let's write 1 in fraction form. Next, since we want to get rid of these fractions, let's find the least common multiple of 3, 4, and 1. so the LCM is 12. Let's multiply 12 to this entire equation. As you can see, I used parentheses. Now, let's distribute 12 to each term. Now, let's divide everything that we can. 3 goes into 12 4 times. And 4 goes into 12 3 times. Next, let's multiply everything out. 4 times x plus 2 plus 3 times x minus 3 is equal to 12 times 1 over 1, which is simply 12. Now, let's distribute. 4 times x is 4x plus 4 times 2 plus 3 times x, or 3x, minus 3 times 3. And this negative is here because it is negative 3. Is equal to 12. Next, we can write 4x plus 8 plus 3x minus 9 is equal to 12. Now, let's bring the variables together and the constants together. So 4x plus 3x is 7x. And positive 8 minus 9 is negative 1. Now, let's take negative 1 to the other side of the equation. So 7x is equal to 13. And finally, let's take 7 to the other side, so it will divide. This gives us a solution of x is equal to 13 over 7. Now let's look at a final example. Here is another equation. Again, we are dealing with fractions, and the variable is x. So let's rewrite this equation. Here, I rewrote the equation. Now to make it a little easier, let's put parentheses around 2x minus 1 and 5x minus 6. Remember to consider this as a whole and keep it together. Now, let's write negative 2 in fraction form. So I can write negative 2 as negative 2 over 1. Now, we need to find the LCM of the denominators in order to get rid of these fractions. So let's find the LCM of 3, 6, and 1. The factors of 3 are 1 and 3. the factors for 6 are 1, 2, 3, and 6. So, since 1 and 3 are factors of 6, the least common multiple is just 6. So let's multiply 6 to this entire equation. Now, let's multiply 6 to each one of these terms and use parentheses. Now, let's divide and cross out anything that we can. 3 goes into 6 2 times. 6 goes into 6 1 time. Now, let's multiply and write this out. 2 times 2x minus 1 minus 5x minus 6 is equal to 6 times negative 2 over 1, which is simply negative 12. Now, let's distribute everything. 2 times 2x is 4x minus 2 times 1. And here, we will distribute negative to both terms. So, we can write this as negative 1 times 5x, which is simply negative 5x. And negative 1 times negative 6 is just positive 6. 4x minus 2 minus 5x plus 6 is equal to negative 12. Now, let's bring the variables and constants together. 4x minus 5x is negative x. Negative 2 plus 6 is positive 4. Now, let's bring this 4 to the other side of the equation. So negative x is equal to negative 12 minus 4. Or negative x is equal to negative 16. Now, let's take this negative to the other side of the equation. So we can write it as x is equal to negative 16 over negative 1. Both of the negatives cancel out, which gives us an answer of x is equal to 16, which is a solution to this equation.